Hi, and welcome to the Neurodiversity Affirming Practice Kickstart webinar. I am so passionate about bringing neurodiversity affirming practice information, practical tips, support, guidance to allied health professionals, education professionals, families, everyone. I hope that I can make this really helpful, practical, and just useful for you to get you started on your neurodiversity affirming practice journey or keep you going along that path. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which I live, work and play, the Gadigal and Bidjigal people. That's on the east coast around the Coogee area in Sydney, Australia. I recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands where you are joining me from today, and I extend my respect to all First Nations people who are present. About me. Now, we might have met before, or we may not have. So if we haven't met, I am Adina Levy. I am a speech therapist. This is me in a former time, but not that different to what I do these days, lining up my nail polish bottles in colour order. I should say I'm very happy that my mum dug up this photo of me aged 3, but I was a little bit sad to find that I hadn't actually figured out how to do it in colour order yet, but I got there. So yeah, I'm neurodivergent. I am an autistic ADHDer, like many other women and non-binary people, quite recently identified. What that means is I went through 36 years of my life not understanding my brain, my neurotype, my identity, knowing I was a little bit different. Sometimes I use terms like introvert, rebel, anxious, all other kinds of descriptors, let's say, to try to understand myself. Understanding my neurotype and my identity as an autistic ADHDer has opened my world. It has clarified so much. It has given me permission to give myself grace, forgive myself, ask for the supports that I need, not all the time, and not nailing it all the time, but much more than I used to, and really understand and advocate for neurodivergent kids, clients, families, community. It's also helped me find community. So understanding my neurodivergence has been very amazing, eye-opening, insightful experience for me and joyful overall. So not 100%, but there have been moments that have been a lot of reflection, a lot of recasting, looking back at my past and trying to re-understand things in a new light with a new context. But it's been incredibly important to my identity. So I just throw that in there to help you understand who I am and where I'm coming from. I've been a speech therapist since 2012, I think. And most of my career, I worked with autistic and neurodivergent children and just found that I really understood them in certain ways. Not everyone, we're not all similar, but there were a lot of commonalities, especially around social limitations, sensory challenges, things like that. I really, really understood the kids that I was working with. And so now I understand a lot more about why I understood them. I was that kid. One of the important things about me and my professional practice, I've always been very dedicated to the process of relearning, changing, pivoting, understanding things in a new light. That very much excites me. And I think because you're here today, I think you're on that journey too. It's probably variously easy or difficult for us to take on new knowledge, question practices that we've learned in the past or done in the past. I have absolutely lived that journey. I'm constantly living it. I just find it's really important as professionals who support neurodivergent kids that we're always assessing what we're doing, our practice, what we teach, how we view kids, how we talk about kids, how we talk about neurodiversity, neurodivergence. This process of learning is always exciting to me. So I hope that it is for you too, but I recognize that it can be scary. It can be uncomfortable. It can be hard work. I have lived all of that. I get it. But it's so important that we can't just put this aside. We can't put aside all this information coming out of the neurodiversity affirming movement and say, oh no, that's not for me. That's not what I was taught. What we have to do is accept, embrace, support neurodivergence, neurodivergent kids and people and community, and understand that neurodiversity is about difference, not disorder. We will talk more about that as we go on. I want to learn about you, enough about me. I know about me. You probably know a bit about me by now. I'd love to learn about you. So I'm going to activate a poll about where you are on your neurodiversity affirming practice journey. That's what I really want to know today. So hopefully that poll, there we go, that should be launched. We'll even be able to see the answers there as you come in with your answers. Wow, cool, a good mix. So I think it's really important and helpful for you to take a moment and recognize if you have learned something about neurodiversity affirming practice. Put that together with what you were doing before this terminology. And we'll definitely reflect on that today and think about what are the practices that you were already doing, even if you called it something else, but they really fit into an affirming approach. And also be thinking about what else do we want to learn about, practice, put in our toolkit as well. Where we've landed, 33% of you are just getting started learning and unlearning. Yes, I'm so glad you're here. That's so cool. I hope that I can be a part of that journey for you. 54% of you are somewhere in the middle. Let's say you've learned a bit and changed a bit. 13% of you have learned a lot and changed a lot. Good. And the reason I didn't put another point, which was I'm finished, I'm done, I've done all the learning, is because none of us ever have. Even me. So I'm sure if you join me in this webinar in another year's time, it might look a bit different. I might share different information. We're all learning together. You might already know if this is for you because you're here. If this is you, then please stay around and learn with me. This is for you today if you're an allied health or an education professional, if you support autistic and neurodivergent children, if you're interested in becoming a more neurodiversity affirming therapist or educator, and you are ready to get started taking concrete actions to make change in how you support neurodivergent children. Maybe that's the most important factor. So I really am all about action. I know there's so much out there. There's a lot of overwhelm out there. And my hope here today is to start shifting that overwhelm into clarity and action. This is some feedback that I've had from professionals like you that kind of made me want to put this together. People wanting to learn more about how they can best support their autistic clients, needing to know so much more about neurodiversity affirming practice approaches, so much to learn. That so much to learn has been a real big theme that's come up time and time again. This one is really important, pretty much everything. It's such a big area with so much grey area. It wasn't spoken about when I was at uni, and I work with so many neurodivergent kids that I feel like I owe it to them to figure this out. Probably should have blown that up because that really highlights, kind of summarizes a lot of the challenges and things that I hear from professionals. Trying to learn about the language to use in neurodiverse affirming practice and looking for specific resources to turn to. So my hope is to help you through some of these. If they feel familiar to you, you may have your own questions and challenges as well, but that's where I'm coming from. In this webinar today, we're going to cover a very brief, because of time, background of what neurodiversity affirming practice is and why it's so important. We're going to talk about 3 types of actionable changes that you can make or start to make today around language, relationship strategies, and a commitment to keep learning. And rather than just sort of have big ideas and go, oh, there's so many things, I'm going to get you to actually pick 3 resources or accounts to follow. Just start really by doing the action today. And I'm going to share how I can support you on your neurodiversity affirming practice journey. It's an absolute special interest of mine to share knowledge, information, and practice with professionals. So it's my absolute delight to share this with all of you today. And then hopefully we can keep this going in the future. So I've sent a link already. You can also just QR code it. That should take you straight to the document. If you're able to print this, it's a 7-page PDF worksheet. I was going to start with a 1-pager and it just grew, but that's how I go. So I would encourage you to print it out if you've got a printer next to you. Otherwise, just look along as we're going and take notes in your own way, whether you do that in your phone, write it down on a piece of paper. My whole point is that you take action and make this clear. Don't just sit there and just listen. I want you to take some action to go down the next steps. Neurodivergent means. Take a moment to think if you could define this. There's a lot of different interpretations about what neurodivergent means. This is one interpretation that I think is quite useful, and it's shared by Sunny, who is lived experience educator on Instagram, very well worth a follow. Their perspective, and many others, and it's not 100% accepted, is that basically any form of different thinking, different way of processing, that includes all of these conditions, falls under the neurodivergent umbrella. So most often we might think about autism, ADHD, but mental health conditions as well fall under the neurodivergent umbrella, including ABI, acquired brain injury, which is a big question that often comes up. Does neurodivergence only come from being born with it? Not necessarily. There are many other ways that people develop different types of brains, essentially. What is neurodiversity affirming practice? Oh, that's a big one. I view it as a human rights approach to understanding and supporting neurodivergent people. I view this approach as seeing neurodiversity as different, not disorder. It comes back to just seeing humans as humans. That is the core of it to me. And really understanding that it's not that there are certain types of humans who are correct or doing human better or, the normal way that things are. I really question that word normal. the normal range of ways that humans are is to be diverse. There are many different types of brain types and ways of processing, thinking, perceiving, communicating, connecting. They're all valid. And if that is not a belief that you really understand or wholeheartedly hold, that's something that you might make a note for yourself to challenge, think about, learn about, and read about. It can take a lot of unlearning. Why? Why are we doing this? As I said, I believe that neurodiversity affirming approaches are human rights approaches. And what that means is everybody deserves to be included. Everybody deserves to be respected, listened to, regarded as whole humans, whether they're big or small, whether they can speak or not speak, whether they contribute financially to our society or just exist as a human without a capacity to work or be independent. Those are not necessarily the highest goals for everybody. I believe, this is a bit of a philosophical moment, but I believe that the goal for everyone, for ourselves and our community, should be about bringing well-being and care and love and connection to people, rather than seeking to have productivity and independence. These things are something we have to question. So again, if these are big beliefs that kind of feel a bit different or challenging, you might want to think about it, learn a bit more about it. Yeah, it's pretty big and interesting. And look, what happens if we don't do neurodiversity affirming practice? If we continue with what I might call the old ways, trying to change neurodivergent people to seem more normal or typical, this can lead to significant mental health difficulties and suicidality. And there's a lot of research out there that points to the fact that when we do not affirm a human for who they are, we are causing great amounts of mental and emotional harm. This could be done in limited sort of small ways, like encouraging masking. So teaching neurotypical social skills in, let's say, the old way, encouraging people to look a little bit more normal and encouraging neurodivergent kids to act a bit like the other kids. And honestly, these are things that I taught in the past. I thought they were right. I thought they were best practice, and that asking kids to fit in was going to be best for them. It's not. It starts young, it starts subtle. And when we're teaching neurodivergent kids that the way that they naturally are is not right and they need to change to fit in, that's where we get huge problems. So come on this journey of unlearning and change. I know you're in it. It may feel uncomfortable, and that is okay. It is really important that you're here, and I thank you. Shall we dive into 3 actions that you can take starting today and take it on into the future? You know, we're not going to cover it all, and you're not going to be done learning at the end of this session. This is, I hope, just a really concrete, actionable starting point. The first thing I want us to talk about is language. Now, in your workbook, page 4, there is a bit of a cheat sheet that I've popped in for you. So basically comparing what is affirming language, what is not affirming language. I have a podcast episode. In fact, it's my first full podcast episode on the Exploring Neurodiversity podcast, where I go through that in a lot more detail. So if you look at that page and you're not really sure why something is on the left or the right, please feel free to listen to that episode. That's episode 1, and that should explain a lot more. And it's something we go into a lot more in depth in my introductory workshop that I'll share a bit more about later. The big piece of language I want us to be shifting, especially around autism, and it's a really pervasive one, is this idea that autism and neurodiversity, but let's focus in on autism for a moment, is a difference, not disorder. That means the acronym ASD, autism spectrum disorder, is not okay. The medical model says it's ASD, it's autism spectrum disorder. The DSM-5, our diagnostic criteria, they say ASD. Probably most of the pediatricians or the doctors or the psychiatrists, many psychologists are referring to ASD, but it's not right. We do not have to accept everything that's come from the medical world at face value. We can question it, and we should question it. So I would like for you to think about where you are on your using the D in ASD journey. Do you use it all the time, unquestioningly? In which case, there's a lot for you to think about and shift. It takes time. Changing language does not happen overnight, and that's okay. Give yourself some grace. But today, I'm going to get you to list the documents, templates, handouts that you use, and I'll give you some ideas what they might be, where you need to change the language. Of course, some of it is changing the language in your own head. How are you going to describe an autistic child to a family? How are you going to write about autism or an autistic person in a report? And again, this is something I go into in a lot more depth in one of my deep dive webinars, but I want you to get started just understanding that the D in ASD is a thing of the past. Sometimes, yes, you might need to refer to the exact diagnosis as given by a doctor, for example. And then every other instance, you do not want to be using ASD. So here are some ideas of where you may need to change language. And in your workbook, you've got a space to write down where you're going to be changing language. And you might have other ideas. Actually, I encourage you to pop them into Q&A if you've got somewhere else where you need to shift language around ASD versus autism or autistic. So it could be your website, social media posts, intake forms, progress notes or session notes, reports. So again, that's a really big one. I understand it's not an easy thing to marry up getting support for kids, but also discussing them in an affirming way, but it is possible. Any handouts or cheat sheets that you share with families, anything else. So pop any other ideas into the Q&A. Let's have a look. We've got a few questions and comments there. How to use NDA language with parents. So one thing would be to share my podcast episodes. It's called Exploring Neurodiversity is my podcast. And episode 1 is where I go into language. And there's also a link for this particular cheat sheet that you've got, and you can share that page with families as well. In psych reports, we often say compared to typically developing peers and highlighting areas of weakness. Yeah, so big questions about how to do this in reports. I would encourage you to check out my deep dive webinar, which is about affirming goal setting and report writing, because there's so much more that we can do, but can't really cram it into our little container today. But it's a very important question. Is independence something that neurodiverse people don't seek as a goal? So just a quick comment about independence and interdependence. It's a good question. Okay, so none of us, I believe, are truly fully independent. It's probably a gradient of independence for every particular task, but it also varies depending on your own capacity. So even think about you, and when you're at your best, you could probably look after yourself all day long, maybe. And when you're not at your best, when you're sick, when you're burned out, when you're tired, you probably are interdependent and supporting other people, and they're supporting you. So just having this sort of unthinking goal around dependence or independence being a goal is not actually affirming, because it may not be an appropriate endpoint for somebody and it may not be consistent. There's just many other goals in life, like being happy. Well, there's a big one to question. Thank you so much for sharing that question. The other thing to note about language is personal preference matters, and I shared this in a podcast episode. The way that somebody chooses to be referred to themselves takes precedence over anything I say. However, in some cases, we might need to support neurodivergent kids to understand their identity and how it fits within the neurodivergent community. Some of you have shared other places where you're going to change language, like when creating visuals in a book. So hopefully by now, you've written down some of the documents, templates, handouts that you use where you need to change the language. And that's exciting. So the next thing to keep even more accountable is, when are you actually going to make these changes? You might not make them all. That's okay. Even things like updating a website might feel like a big overwhelming task. Get started. So even pop something in your calendar for, say, Thursday lunchtime. Do it right now and say, on Thursday at lunchtime, I'm going to update these 3 documents, or I'm just going to spend half an hour updating where I need to. And find out or write down who's going to be your accountability, a colleague, a friend, a partner. You may not need one, but I find for a lot of us, it's really helpful to report back to somebody else. And you might even say to them, maybe you've got a practice manager or an admin who can help you with this. And just literally write them a text right now and say, on Thursday at lunchtime, we're going to spend half an hour updating our language. Let's do it together. Just lock it in and make it accountable in a way that works for you. Let's move on to relationship strategies. I love these. It was really hard to pick 3, but these are my top 3 right now. Acknowledging that a lot of you probably do these strategies all the time, a lot of the time, often. And I want you to even be thinking as I go through them, what do you do well, as well as which one of these do you want to think about more and heighten, do more of it. Broadly, these relationship-based strategies are all about more acceptance of a child and less about changing a child to fit in. So we've got 3, and I will ask you to pick, like I said, your one that you want to keep working on, as well as reflect where you're really solid and you really nail this strategy. So the first strategy we're talking about is around supporting behavior by understanding and collaborating. This is a huge amount of ideas in 1 or 2 slides. So yes, if you want to understand more and go deeper, please do check out my deep dive webinar on this topic. However, we can really get started thinking about this. We need to view behaviors as the child doing their best in that moment. If there's a challenging behavior, however you define it, you need to be considering what is the deep reason behind it. What are the deep whys that contribute to that behavior? Not the immediate triggers, the things that happen just before the behavior, That is too shallow and short-sighted to really understand what the challenge is for the child to be able to meet your expectations. We need to be working with children to support them rather than punishing and shaming. This might look very different in your life in different settings. At home versus when you're working with kids. When you're working with certain kids, it might look very different. So have a bit of a reflection about how this matches with your view of behavior and why challenging behaviors happen. Some of the deep whys, deep reasons that may contribute to challenging behaviors can be around a child needing connection, aka seeking attention, but that is not a problem. That's a very human thing. We often might cast a negative light on seeking attention, but it's really not a bad thing. We all need it. Another deep why might be sensory needs or dysregulation, difficulty sensing internal feelings, so interoception, so not understanding if you're tired, hungry, need the bathroom, feeling sick, any other kind of internal feeling. Uncertainty, what's happening or what's expected, a task being too hard, and that could be for so many reasons. Difficulty expressing their needs, wants, or emotions. And in almost all cases, the reason, the deep why behind a challenging behavior is a combination of these things. So this relationship strategy, rather than being about exactly what you do, it's more about how you think about how a child is acting and therefore how you respond next. So the collaboration piece, it's something that Dr. Ross Green talks a lot about, and I share his book in one of the resources. Very, very strongly recommended. Once you've figured out what the deep why is, and sometimes you might need a child to help you figure it out. Sometimes you might have to do a lot of detective work to figure it out, have your best guess, is work through the challenge collaboratively with the child. Rather than go top down, adult dictating what the child needs to do, think about these kids as little humans who should have voice and agency in whatever capacity they can, to work with you to come up with solutions that seem appropriate to everyone. Relationship strategy 2, accept all communication. Speech is not better than other ways of communicating. I do have a podcast episode on this that I cannot remember the number off the top of my head, which episode it is. But basically the idea is speech is not better than non-speech communication. It's a very ableist belief to try and have that as the highest goal for children to speak. Some people find it very variable, it changes how much they're able to speak at different times. Some people might take a long time to be able to speak. It may be very effortful. Some people may never speak, but they may communicate in other ways, and that is okay. So this might be another thing to examine in yourself, how much your belief about speech versus non-speech communication affects how you support kids in your interactions with them. This is the action. Rather than focusing on speech, focus on communication and relationship. That means honoring and responding to all communication attempts, not waiting or coercing or withholding things while you're waiting for a child to speak. And the way that you're supporting their communication, not just their speech, is by you modeling speech and also modeling other ways of communicating. There may be a lot to examine here around your own beliefs and practices, so I'm just going to leave that thought with you if that's something you need to follow up further. Relationship strategy 3. I love this one. Make motivating things the main activity. I'll give you a little thought experiment in a moment. This is all about creating fun, motivating learning opportunities that are relevant for the children. It's not about withholding a motivating topic, toy, or activity as the reward. It's not about doing the boring thing to get the fun thing. It's not about stopping talking about the main interest so you can do boring stuff or the adult's agenda and then coming to your interest at the end, or even never. It's actually all about using motivating activities and topics as the main activity. What does that look like? So, one example, Cherie is an 8-year-old autistic ADHDer. She loves trains and she finds maths hard and boring. How could you use trains to help her learn about maths concepts? Pick any maths concept, whatever comes to your mind, rather than withholding trains until the end of the maths lesson. So I'll get you to pop any ideas you've got in the Q&A. My gosh, we've got so many comments there. So any ideas, you pick the math concept. I don't really mind. It's more the idea of how do we match a learning topic that is important with an interest. Great ideas. So counting how many trains, adding together the trains, counting the wheels on each part, how many wheels on the whole train, counting wheels, windows, counting, patterning, adding, subtracting. Great. Addition, patterning, categorizing. I love it. Use trains when learning one-to-one correspondence, fractions. How many of the trains are red? Timing. Yes. Arrivals, departures. I'm even thinking shape, multiplication. You've got it. So many great ideas. How do we manage impulsive behaviors in this situation if they just want to play with trains in the way they want to? Generally, the answer is let them do that in most cases. We always need to start from a position of yes before we go to a no or a boundary. I go a lot more into this in my Affirming Approaches to Supporting Behavior deep dive webinar. Yeah. So it depends on the setting. There's a lot of it depends, but start with a yes before we go to a no or a boundary. Here's another one. Jack is a 4-year-old autistic child. They love talking about colours and lining up objects in rainbow colour order. Hi, Jack, I see ya. Imagine one goal that you commonly work on with young children and how you could build colour patterns lining up to support that goal. So now we're thinking, think about perhaps a child that you work with and a goal that you're working on, something that you're helping them learn at the moment. How could you match that with what Jack likes? Colour lining up, matching, rainbow order. Okay, some ideas of what we could do with Jack. Cutting pieces of paper in rainbow order, spelling activities using rainbow writing. Oh, I love that. Labels, receptive language interaction, making a rainbow using items he loves, using colours for visual routine. Beautiful. So many great ideas. Dressing, organising clothes in preferred order, choice making, which colour goes next in the lineup. I love it. Modelling of AAC, that's augmentative and alternative communication, if you don't know that acronym. Yes, plasticine rainbows. I want to play all of these games. That's awesome. Great. I can see you're all really thinking about how to bring this interest in with something that is a learning goal. Sometimes we might still question what our learning goal is and if that's appropriate, but that's probably a topic for another day. But bringing those ideas together, make the motivating thing the main activity. One of you's got a great question. How would you suggest we find motivation in autistic children under 2 years? Just watch, stop and watch, see what they like, see what they're interested in, what grabs their attention. It could often be very much about sensory exploration. That's fine too. You might have to get quite creative in how you bring together what the child is interested in and things that you kind of think they should be learning, but actually we might even need to question that. So the reflection for you is, and you can write this on your page, write it down for yourself, which relationship strategy that I shared do you already do very well? Which one relationship strategy will you focus on first when you interact with autistic and neurodivergent children? Let's say over the next week, just pick one of these strategies that you think, I really need to think about that a bit more and get yourself even more accountable. Write down how exactly are you going to do this. So think about a particular child, a client or a student that you support. Think about what you're going to do to, say, build in this. Maybe it's not preferencing speech over non-speech. Maybe it's about bringing in their learning goals with their interests. Maybe it's about supporting their behavior by reconfiguring how you think about their behavior. So I'll give you a moment now to get actionable, write your plan here. And just as a bit of a recap, strategy 1, you've actually got it on your paper, but strategy 1 is about supporting behavior by understanding and collaborating. Strategy 2 is about accepting all communication. Strategy 3 is about making motivating things the main activity. As you're writing that down, I am going to head on to number 3. Our third action today is about either following accounts, choosing to register or buy a book, or, really getting 3 resources that are going to take your learning into the future. I want you to learn in the way that you prefer. So if you don't listen to podcasts, then don't write podcasts. Unless you feel like you want to explore it, go for it. If you love books, write down books. If you love learning from Facebook groups, fine, do that. Or do a mix. But the most important thing is you're picking ways that you like to learn. I want you to pick at least 3 to 5, but maybe not more than 5 resources that you want to follow. And even grab your phone and follow them right now. The reason I say not more than 5 is because I want you to take action in a way that feels achievable for you. But if you want to go and follow more, please do go for it. So this link here, if you hold your phone up to it, it will take you to my website where I've got a resources page, and these are all linked, or most. If I'm missing any links, let me know at the bottom of the page and I'll add them in, or if there's a broken link, let me know. But you should be able to find these resources mostly on my resources page. I want to make it easy for you. So podcasts that you might want to listen to are there: Exploring Neurodiversity, Neurodivergent Woman, ADHD Adults, Differently Brained, Yellow Ladybugs, The Princess and the Pea, Think Inclusive, Two Sides of the Spectrum. This is not an exhaustive list. There are other amazing resources out there. These are just some that I love to get you started. Books for grown-ups: Chloe Hayden's Different Not Less, Dr. Devon Price, Unmasking Autism, Dr. Russ Green, The Explosive Child. I mentioned that one before when talking about behavior. Very important read. Pete Warmby, Untypical, Kay Kerr, Love and Autism, and Yellow Ladybugs, Supporting Autistic Girls and Gender Diverse Youth book. strongly recommend looking up 1, 2, or 3 of those if that is your style. Some kids books that you might get as resources to support how you talk to kids, share them with kids, but also for yourself as a way of thinking and learning too. The Brain Forest and The Rainbow Brain by Sandhya Menon. A Day Without Words by Tiffany Hammond. Love Me, Love My ADHD by Chrissy Davies. My Brother Otto and the Birthday Party by Meg Raby. All really great kids books. There are, again, so many more, but please start there. Now, Instagram accounts. So this is where you definitely might want to grab the QR code and you can just tap them and find them. There's many more on my website as well. These are all accounts that I love. It's very hard to pick the ones that would fit on the page. But yeah, go and explore. And the big idea is to follow diverse voices. Don't just follow speaking white women like me. Try to follow a mix of people with different communication ability, different lifestyle, different racial background, different experience, different cognitive ability. Danny and Courtney are both AAC users and share a whole lot of information about their perspectives and their life not using speech. So big idea is just go diverse. Facebook groups and pages that I really like. I'll just leave that up there for a moment. But again, you can find all these links on my website. I'm sure you all have many, many, many more. Okay, where to next? This is the beginning. I hope you've written down some ideas to take you into the next steps, to make changes today, this week in your mindset, in how you relate to kids, and how you talk about autism, neurodiversity. This is the beginning. You may like to take the solo DIY path and just listen and learn and absorb and take your time, and that is okay. If you want more help, I'm here. Let me help thee. So if you just want to dip your toes in and you're thinking, I'm just getting started on this journey, I've got a 2-hour introductory workshop, which is on demand. So you can watch it at a time that suits you. You get 12 months access when you register, and I keep it practical. As you can see, my style today is all about, there's a workbook, there's action, there's thinking, there's relating your learning to your experience and your practice and your world. I've got 3 different currencies you can access that in. In the introductory workshop, this is what we cover. It's a lot, and some of it we're just getting started. We're scratching the surface. We're getting some, the big ideas. And in the deep dive webinars, we literally dive in deep and we go to much more specificity. I share examples, I share case studies, things like that. Now, it feels really awkward for a person like me to say, this is what people are saying, but people have shared really wonderful feedback about the workshops and the webinars, and this is some of the feedback I've got. What I think is really important to me is making the learning practical, and I can see that that's coming through to people, and also challenging people in a way that is friendly and helpful, but not, I hope, too confronting to take you to a place that you go, whoa, hang on, that's too much. I absolutely love teaching and supporting learning in a way that is well-paced for each person. So I really, really hope that that's what comes through to you from today's session and from any future support that we might do together. Where to next? I will send you an email so you can find the links to take you onto those next steps. That should take you where you need to go. And I can't wait to find out who is going to join me next on this journey. I'd love to just journey with you. It makes me very excited. Other ways we can stay connected. Joining me on Instagram, again, like a QR code. You can just head over to my account there if we're not already connected. There's one to my podcast, Exploring Neurodiversity. You can listen to it on whatever podcatcher app you like to listen to. Friends, thank you so, so much for joining. I'm just so honored to share this space with you and to share this knowledge, these ideas, the excitement that I have for neurodiversity affirming practice. It is a journey. It will take time. And that is totally fine. Please keep me posted on where you head on your journey, and I hope we can stay connected. Thank you so, so much. Have a beautiful day, morning, afternoon, sleep wherever you're at. I'll catch you soon. Bye.